Hello, hello, and good morning to everyone joining us right now. We have about 50 people in the session, and I'm sure there will be some more who will join us. Welcome to the third session of the day. This session, we will be exploring an inspiring and illuminating piece of contemporary literature, Randy Ribay's Patron Saints of Nothing, and we will take a deep dive into pop culture and drugs. There are a lot of creative works that feature drug use, and we want to answer questions like how do these works shape our view of drug use, and how can we deepen our view on narratives of drug use? This session, we will have someone who I consider a good friend and who I personally look up to answer these questions by unpacking Randy Ribay's Patron Saints of Nothing and related to other forms of popular media. So I am very honored to introduce our speaker for today, Orly Agawin. Orly is a distinguished leader and trainer. He received the Presidential Award for Student Leadership in 2003 for helping establish the National Student Training Program Act and also received a Fulbright Scholarship in New York University. Orly established a consulting network of learning and development professionals called OSA Training and Educational Services. He's also the co-founder of a community-based organization working towards promoting human rights and harm reduction in the Philippines, Safe Open Space. So we have with us Mr. Orly Agawin. Orly, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Rod. Right, so I'm sharing my screen. Before I begin, I'd like to congratulate the NoBox team. You guys are fabulous. You guys, the team is really doing a great job with this summit. To think that with the kind of situation where we are right now, you guys were still able to push through with something as big as this, and something that pushes and promotes the advocacy that we have. Thank you very much, NoBox, for this wonderful summit, and I'm really very honored to be part of this exercise. Um, every once in a while, we come across a contemporary work in popular culture that that validates our insights and our mission. In our case, in Safe Open Space, it was Patron Saints of Nothing by Randy Ribay. We came across this novel in 2019, and it was published on the same year. No, it exposes the consequences of the government's war on drugs. It draws the varying levels of stigma and discrimination among people whose lives involve drugs. And it also provides a commentary on the reflections of an outsider looking in. Further, it draws the dynamics between and among the elements of the following, like say, for example, the use of drugs, the people, the culture, the media, and other external elements that influence the behavior, the lifestyle, and the choices of the individual. And finally, it also looks at the actual individual himself who is involved in drugs. Finally, it gives us a chance to see beyond the individual. It gives us an opportunity to reflect on how we could expand our self-awareness to connect, to provide service, and to potentially promote harm reduction, thus ultimately uphold human rights. Good morning, everyone. My name is Orly Agawin. I'm from Safe Open Space. Join me in a deep dive as we examine a work that takes us into the narrative of a person who is involved in drugs, the people behind him, and the society that contributed to his choices, to his lifestyle and his behavior. Welcome to Drugs in Pop Culture, examining the drug setting in Randy Ribay's Patron Saints of Nothing. As we go along this presentation, we'll examine how drugs are presented in mainstream media, like in literature, and in this case, in Randy Ribay's Patron Saints of Nothing. We'll look at how it affects our own perceptions, our own biases, how works like Patron Saints of Nothing offers a unique perspective to drug use, involvement, and compassion. Eventually, we'll find ways on how we can add further value in our services and relationships with people involved in drugs. Well, similar to other talks, ladies and gentlemen, that we have in this summit will be using terms and jargons like harm reduction, people whose lives involve drugs, people involved with drugs, drug use, evidence-based solutions, setting, community services, psychopharmacological studies. These this may be familiar to most of us here in the room today, but for those who will be hearing these terms for the first time, we'll do our best to put them in context for you. At this point, let me share with you our agenda for today. So first, we'll have a look at the work. No, we'll get to know the story. I'll give you a quick run through of the characters as well as the critical plot points, and we'll have a collective experience of the work. No. Second, we'll analyze how it reflects our own realities in the Philippines. We'll probably be skipping some data, but we'll definitely be discussing how stigma and discrimination is still rampant in media, in institutions, in organizations, as well as in our communities towards people involved with drugs. Third, we'll have a quick look at Leary's drug setting model. Saan ito nagsimula, no? How it came about in the 70s, how it evolved as a framework, and how we use it today to draw a more holistic picture of the individual. Paano namin ito nagagamit, no? Para mas maintindihan ang mga tao na involved sa drugs, and use it as a reference to provide individualized services and unique and appropriate support. Before we end, we'll ask ourselves, so what? No, what now? No, how can this piece of literature help me in what I do? How can the drug setting framework be integrated in the exercises that I do every day? We'll answer questions like, what can I do to expand awareness of the individual further and show this in works or in literatures, in the contents that I upload and that I share in the media. For our first stop, let's have a quick look at the novel. Let's talk about the work, how it was perceived, how it was received in the Philippines, where it is now, and then we'll have a glimpse of the work through a bit-sized chapter. And finally, I'll quickly provide a summary of the plot. So for those who still haven't seen or read Patron Saints of Nothing, it's a powerful coming-of-age story about grief, about guilt, about the risk of a young Filipino-American teenager who went to the Philippines to uncover the truth about his cousin's murder. When a distributor offered this to our bookstores in the Philippines, it was, it took some time for our bookstores to actually give their yes, no, considering that this is a Filipino-American novel, and most of the time our industry, our book industry, especially those on the consumer side, are very much welcoming to works, no, written by Filipino-American authors. But this one, however, took them some time to give their yes, no? As a matter of fact, it was even rejected by one of our leading bookstores in the Philippines as part of their young adult titles. It never had a book launch in a bookstore. But at one point in June of 2019, somewhere in Quezon City, a group of book bloggers and vloggers, they call themselves Bookworm Unite. They sponsored a book launch for this book in the Philippines, and Randy Ribay was a guest in the book launch. If you would notice, if you go to bookstores where they sell Patron Saints of Nothing, observant readers and consumers would notice that this book cannot be found easily in display stacks, in mga tables, no, and cap of bookshelves. It's either you ask for it in the customer service booth, or you look for it yourself. For now, it is currently on stock at Fully Book and Pandayan bookstore outlets. If you're interested to get a copy, please do so. This is something that we highly recommend and one of my best reads from last year. At this point, let me share with you an experience of the work. No, let's have a collective experience so that we could have a feel of the tone, the narrative, the milieu. You know, a feel of the of the characters in the chapter that I'll be sharing with you. I'll be sharing a screenshot of the chapter, and at the same time, a brief reading by Ramon de Ocampo. In this excerpt, our main character Jay, for the first time, learns about what happened to his cousin Jay in the Philippines, to his cousin June in the Philippines, because of his involvement in drugs. I'd like you to particularly look at how how Jay's father, delivers the news to his son. No. And then later on, we'll try to talk about it and touch on it when we talk about stigma and the way that we manifest those stigma in our conversations. So at this point, I'll stop sharing my slide for now, and I'll have NoBox share the video for everyone.
I sleep in on Saturday because I've got no plans beyond gaming with Seth later tonight after he finishes his shift at the sock store. I shuffle downstairs in my joggers and an old t-shirt, and after what I'll generously call brunch, sink into the living room couch and fire up my PS4 to make some progress in this one-player game where you battle massive robot dinosaurs in a post-apocalyptic Earth. I don't know how many hours into this session I am when my dad's suddenly standing behind me, like he's learned to apparate. "Jason, can you pause your game for a second?" he asks. "I'm almost at a checkpoint," I say. "Jason," he starts, and then falters. He tries again. "Jason, I have something important to tell you." "Hold on." I'm pretty sure this is probably going to be about college or something, and I don't really want to talk about that anymore. Plus, I'm in the zone, fighting this mech T-Rex that's already killed me like 1,000,000 times. "Jay," he says. I slide down a hill and draw my bow and arrow, triggering the slow motion mode. I release 2 arrows in quick succession. Both hit the beast's energy core, drawing heavy damage and narrowing its HP counter to a sliver. "Yes!" I say. "Your Tito Maning called." He pauses. "June is dead." My fingers slow, but I keep playing. I'm not sure I heard him right. Wait. What? Dad clears his throat. "Your cousin, June. He's dead." I freeze, gripping the controller like a ledge. I suddenly feel like I'm going to be sick. On the screen, the mechanical creature mauls my avatar. My life drains to 0. The camera pans upward, mimicking the soul's skyward path. The words finally land, but they don't feel real. I was just thinking about my cousin last night. "That's impossible," I say. I sit up and shift so I'm facing Dad. He's still wearing his nurse's scrubs, and his salt and pepper hair is disheveled, like he's been running his fingers through it. Behind his glasses, his eyes are bloodshot. I glance at the time again. Mom's at the hospital, and he should be too. "I thought you'd want to know," he adds. "When?" I ask, my chest tightening. "Yesterday." I'm quiet for a long time. What happened? I mean, how did he... I can't say the word. He sighs. "It doesn't matter." "What?" I ask. "Why not?" "He's gone. That's it." "He was 17, I say. 17-year-olds don't randomly... He takes off his glasses and rubs his eyes. "Sometimes they do." "So it was random? Like a car accident or something?" Dad puts his glasses back on, but avoids looking at me. He says nothing for a few beats, and then quietly, "What would it change if you knew?" I don't answer because I can't. Doesn't the truth itself matter? I should be crying or throwing my controller down in anguish, but I don't do any of this. Instead, there's only a mild confusion, a muddy feeling of unreality that thickens when I consider the distance that had developed between Jun and me. How do you mourn someone you already let slip away? Are you even allowed to? Since I don't know, I mirror the disturbing calm of my father, as I always do. We share the space, the silence, but on the inside, I'm a plane with failing engines. He's gone, Dad repeats after some time. That's it. And then a nervous laugh escapes his lips. I try to process the information. Jun is dead. His life has ended. And here I am, sitting in my living room on the other side of the world, a can of Coke on the coffee table, playing a video game on an enormous, wall-mounted flat-screen TV. College on the docket. Dad wanders away. Wait, I call after him. Can we get there in time for the funeral? He stops. Over his shoulder. There won't be one. Confusion hits me like a wall. Why not? Your Tito Maning doesn't want to have one. The way he died, it's not our concern. What do you mean? I ask. But he's already gone, probably retreating upstairs. Left alone, my confusion turns to anger, which starts to grow with nowhere to go like the roots of a plant in too small a pot. I finally drop the controller and bury my face in my hands. I take a few shaky, deep breaths. But my heart continues to race. My jaw stays clenched. My stomach remains knotted. I think of all the letters we wrote each other over the years. What did his last one say? I don't even remember. But this I'll never forget. I left it unanswered.
All right. So let me share my screen again. So as you can see, we have two characters. No, we're seeing two characters in two possible main characters as early as that for one of the first few chapters in the novel, and we have Jay Reguero and June, who is Jay's cousin. No. But before we begin, let's try to examine that chapter, especially the conversation between Jay and his father. Probably you have noticed, no, that the father doesn't mention anything about drugs, no, and for me and my colleagues, we see this as early as the first chapters, that we are confronted with the kind of stigma that we have against drugs, that we don't talk about it. Or if we talk about it, if we say drugs, if we put the term drugs in the conversation, I can put in there, he died because he's into drugs. He was disowned. We're not having a funeral because he was killed because he's a drug user, right? So as early as the first chapters in the novel, Ribay was already able to establish the kind of stigma, no, that Jay Reguero is going to confront in the rest of the narrative. So you see, guys, we have Jay Reguero, the one on the left, and June, Jay's cousin, on the right. June, ladies and gentlemen, though dead, serves as an enigma throughout the novel. His story unfolds as Jay finds answer. It is through June that we find the aspects of the drug setting later on. But before that, let's have a quick summary. I'll give you a quick summary of the novel. So spoilers ahead. So as Jay Reguero learns about the death of his cousin June, he travels to the Philippines to search for the truth. No, and when he came to the Philippines, he once again meets June's family, and learns that he was disowned. June was disowned prior to his death. Jay soon finds out how June was treated by his father Maning, who is a chief of police and a strong supporter of the government's war on drugs. June learns more about Jay learns more about June when he moved to his aunt Chato's home. He learns about June's passion for literature, for music, for arts. No, um, along the way, Jay meets a student journalist. Her name is Mia, who tells him more about the ongoing war on drugs in the Philippines. And with the help of Mia, they were able to meet Reina. And they found out that before he died, June had a girlfriend who June saved before from an abusive employer. So at this point, you would see that June is someone who is passionate about his art. He's passionate about helping others. He's very other centric. He has low self orientation. And at the same time, he was able to develop a relationship with a woman. At the same time, show his search and his passion for social justice, no, and upholding women's rights. Towards the end of the novel, he meets his uncle Danilo, who's a priest in the countryside, and he finally learns about the truth about June's involvement in drugs. No, according to Father Danilo, months before his death, June has really been selling and using drugs. He was not killed by the police, but by a vigilante who probably also has his own set and setting and probably doing that kind of work because of the promise of a reward from the government. And upon learning this, Jay was devastated. No, Jay is devastated upon learning the truth. All the while, in the entire novel, you as the reader, along with Jay, is hopeful that he was never involved in drugs. There's no drugs. There's no drugs in the conversation. He's a good person. He's compassionate. But then all of a sudden, bam! You see, and this devastated Jay towards the end of the novel. But eventually, like Jay, the reader, also in my case, myself, no, we recovered and realized that number one, the factors that surrounded June's life have influenced his behaviors and his decision. June's behavior, his motivations, his relationships, identity go beyond the drug factor in his life. And that June's life is not fully defined by his involvement in drugs. And this was very, very much reflected and commented on in the novel. By the end of the story, Jay returns to the United States with a renewed sense of hope and compassion, and with the hope that he could strengthen further his relationship with other people, and at the same time view people not because of what they do, but as individuals and humans themselves. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is Patron Saints of Nothing. At this point, we'll look at how patron saints reflect the realities in our Philippines today. What do we see in our headlines? What are the consequences? We'll start by analyzing how Patron Saints of Nothing reflects the realities in our world today. We'll be talking about stigma, the kind of oppression our main character June faced before he died. If you really think about it, though the country has started to address minimizing stigma and discrimination among PLHIVs, people with disabilities, the LGBTQI plus community, and women, little progress have been made against people involved in drugs. No, government laws, the policies that we have in place promote a nationwide stigma as it taps on culture, on policies, education, and national principles. Consequently, it triggers and fossilizes institutionalized stigma. People who use drugs are blamed for their choices. They are tagged as enemy of the state. No, we've our society generally see them as a person who is a manifestation of moral weakness and flawed character. In 2018, the Commission on Higher Education, in Memorandum Order Number 18, Series of 2018, strongly encourages universities and colleges to integrate mandatory drug testing during college admission processes, posing threats to the individual's right to education. While these mindsets continue to cloud our judgment and the way we interact with the people around us, stigma continues on and manifest themselves in discriminatory practices through processes and policies. And as these set parameters to potential access to factors like education, to healthcare, freedom of expression, potential options for individuals, members of key affected population soon minimize opportunities to uphold their individual rights. At this point, let's have a walkthrough of the drug setting model. The drug setting model, ladies and gentlemen, is something that we will be using as a lens in order for us to look at the individual. If yesterday, to Dr. Lee's point, he used the analogy of seeing the world through a red lens in Sophie's world, no? But at this point, we'll be more specific with the tool or with the approach that we will be using in terms of investigating and analyzing Patron Saints of Nothing. So here, we will flesh out the framework, no? So saan nanggaling ang DSS? Saan nanggaling ang drug setting? Where did it originate? What are how do we categorize the aspects surrounding the individual, and how could this expand my understanding of the person or the individual in the center of the framework? And then finally, we hopefully could establish a potential lens in finding a new perspective to seeing a person whose lives involve drugs. So even prior to the 60s, no, the drug setting model has already been present, pero wala pa siyang pangalan. It still doesn't have a name. It was only in the 60s when it was Timothy Leary introduced this, no, into the cultural discourse. And it was presented as a paper in the American Psychological Association in September 1961, no? In the 70s and the 80s, psychologists and poets like Moreau and Baudelaire followed suits, integrating this model in their work and in their researches. In 1998, Lewin expanded the model by further establishing the effects, no, as a result of many other factors surrounding the individual. But it is in 2000 to the present, no, when McElrath and McEvoy had a rethinking, no, a redefining of the drug setting model. And according to them, the drug setting model can go beyond the actual or the moment of experience, no? Most of the time kasi when we look at the drug setting, it's only focused on the actual experience, the moment of activity, when the person is taking drug right here, right now, no? And according to this study or rethinking in 2002 by McElrath and McEvoy, that the drug setting framework could also be used in other situations, even in between activities or experiences, no? For purposes of this discourse, we'll make use of McElrath and McEvoy's 2002 redefinition of the drug setting model. This, ladies and gentlemen, is something that we have been using in safe open space whenever we interact and connect with our partners and people in our communities. Here, we'll go beyond the actual experience, no? Most of the time, we look at individual, we interact with an individual na hindi naman gumagamit right there and then, no? And for us, that could also be a valuable experience and a moment for conversations. We'll look at the realities of the individual by using this rethinking, and like how it is originally conceived, we also respect the dynamism of the different elements. Just to visualize everything for you, this is how the drug setting looks like, no? Especially for those who are just encountering this for the first time. So the drug is the substance of choice, no? It includes the examination of dosage, of side effects, frequency, chemical components, uh, combinations, no? Quality, saan ito nakuha, and mode of administration. If you would look at the other side of the slide, you'll see there the set, no? The set is internal to the individual. Ito ay nasa loob ng individual, no? It covers personality, mga adhikain or motivations, behavior, ugali, perspectives, gender, race, values, age, health status, or health condition. Part of the framework too would be the setting. The setting is more diverse, mas malawak siya, at mas mabilis siyang magbago, no? This is external to the individual. It includes but not limited to your support system, the individual's access to service, availability of resources, society, environment, laws, location of activity, safety, and security. And what makes this such a powerful tool for harm reduction? Number one, if you would look at the framework, it places the aspects according to its relationship with the individual. Another would be it isolates the individual from the factors that influence him or her. You see? So at this point, nakikita natin yung individual as a person being influenced by many other factors. At hindi lamang ito drugs. Another, to that point, no, it visualizes and exhibits how the drug factor is just one of the many aspects in the totality or in the universe of the individual's reality. To sum it all up, no, the drug setting model, it provides us with a wider perspective to understanding the individual as it establishes each component. Management becomes more identified and purpose-driven. When we recommend intervention or provide insights for reflections, we can provide a more direct and manageable approach. By using this model, we can draft a more individualized intervention, both meaningful, relevant, and in processing works, like in the work that we do, like if we are in journalism, if we are content creators, influencers, writers, authors, no, or people who are engaged in learning and development, we can critique more effectively with the use of the drug setting first perspective. Finally, as we ourselves create these narratives, the drug setting framework paves an alternative process in creation and development. So at this point, no, we go back now to Patron Saints of Nothing. And now that we have this tool, let's use this. No, sabi nga ni Doc Lee yesterday, no, let's use this as our lens in seeing June as the individual, who is in the center of the entire framework. No, at aalamin natin, and we will gather the devices that Ribay put into his work in order for us to flesh out the realities in June's life when he was alive. So, at first, we see June as our character in the novel who, number one, who sold and used drug. His final years involved the use of drugs. He was disowned by his family because they saw they saw marijuana in his room. And then he died alone, no? By using the DSS, we look now at the drug, no? And at this point, we'll be using marijuana, no? Because Ribay was very explicit when it comes to that term. And as much as we want to assume other substances in the novel, this is the only thing that we only see explicitly in the novel as with relations to June as our character. Next would be his setting, no? He's male, he's 17 years old. He has high trust level. He is encouraging. He's compassionate. He is values driven. There's identity versus role confusion, which is very normal or very understandable considering he's at that age. No, and then we'll look at the setting. No, the setting on the other hand would be so much vast. No, the nuclear family, the extended family, Reina, the society, the laws, the government, the church. So after identifying and enumerating the ranges of realities in June's life, we examine how these may have influenced June's responses and decisions. These aspects may also pave a way for us to further understand the individual and draw a more holistic picture of the realities as found in the novel. The family, like the society and the laws in his land, view drug use as something as immoral and criminal. This ultimately influences the members of the household to withdraw support from the individual. June's lack of support from his immediate family has made him consider other means of escape. The use of marijuana may have been a bolt of freedom, or a form of rebellion, or probably it may just have been out of young curiosity. The quality of support and care from Chato and Ines had provided him with the emotional connection that he was looking for from his own family. This was very much manifested when Chato described June, how June gained weight and looked healthier when June stayed in their home. Jay, as mentioned, also has his own share in June's reality. His inconsistency in providing support has somehow contributed to the varying levels of support in June's life. This would somehow emphasize that connections are fleeting and ever-changing. One will notice how June's compassion and hopeful outlook continued on despite the factors surrounding his immediate household. When given the chance to freely express them in another setting, this manifests his need to identify himself, and as he establishes his own contribution and identity in the society. So if you would look very closely at the framework, friends, you would notice that we have isolated June, no? We have visualized June in the center, and then we put and categorize each aspect that influenced his behavior, his decision, in terms of his own lifestyle and his behavior as an individual. Just by looking at this, we'll be able to see if June is still alive, how we could promote harm reduction, how we could reach out to June appropriately and provide him with the needed support, or with the support that he needs, no? Because Patron Saints of Nothing explores June's drug setting at all levels. Here we see how we can draw a more holistic understanding of the individual and extend a more empathic response to the person involved in drugs. Patron Saints of Nothing's narrative does not take the usual route of saving his central character. No, it doesn't have a star cinema ending or a Hollywood ending where June is, after all, not really involved in drugs. No, Ribay was very firm with his statement, and he was very unapologetic when he maintains the truth about his life and his decisions. It is clear at this point that we are faced by a more realistic approach to storytelling, one that reflects the realities in our own communities and members of key affected population. While the drug setting interact and influence one another, these factors can be addressed and managed effectively through effective categorization and compassion. We can tap on each aspect and provide relevant and appropriate options for the individual. So as you can see, Patron Saints of Nothing provides an opportunity for us to see how we can fully maximize approaches to harm reduction by expanding our awareness on the various realities surrounding the individual. Through these, we can find a more appropriate response, a more relevant service, offer responses that are unique and are rights-based, as it explore the ranges of realities and at the same time uphold human rights while encouraging us to extend compassion and empathy towards others. So what now? No? How can we use such exercise in what I do? No? How can I use the drug setting model in my conversations with people, especially people whose lives involve drugs? To Dr. Lee's point in his talk yesterday, how can I consciously take on a new lens to view and uphold humanity and compassion towards people? So before we begin with you and share with you things that we could reflect on, no, we at SOS have thrived on continued conversation, no, by strengthening relationships with our partners and community members, and we integrate the drug setting framework in our conversations and interventions. And it is with pride, no, that we share with you how we have seen improvements among our partners and clients. If I may just share, at the start of the intervention, we have noticed that among our clients and our partners, no, we have noticed high health risk or increased frequency and general lack of awareness of their use and potential support during actual experiences. So the things that we look at would be high health risk, frequency, lack of awareness in terms of, are they aware that their use is already problematic? How could we make it more manageable for the individual? Another would be lack of awareness of potential support. No? And when we say lack of awareness of potential support, if I go into an activity or if I use drugs right now, may naka-ready bang support? Meron ba akong matatakbuhan? Who are the people with me? Is there someone in the group who would be able to provide me with harm reduction responses if something bad happens to me? For the span of 2 years, among our peers, no, and our partners, we have noticed a significant decrease. We have noticed a significant decrease in frequency, a significant decrease in dosage, and increase awareness of use. No, they soon realize that their use is already problematic. No, as well as yung awareness nila when it comes to having the needed support and preparedness before they engage in an experience. So you see, harm reduction is really all about helping individual live longer. Sabi nga kahapon, no? Harm reduction is about promoting people's well-being, not just for the individual, but also for their families and organizations and communities. Through pragmatic compassion, like the way J. Reguero showed us at the end of Patron Saints, we can put more value to the kindness and empathy that we manifest. So how do we do it? As someone who only has a limited view of everyone's ranges of realities in this room today, what we can offer are questions that we can reflect on as we move forward with the intent to reduce harm, to challenge stigma, present the individual using the big picture, how to encourage well-being and uphold human rights and dignity. So for people in education and those practicing professionals in learning and development, before we engage in integrating the framework in our discourses, we could start in ourselves, no, by asking these questions. What are my biases as a person, no, as a content creator, as an educator? How do we initiate conversations about drugs, no? How do I manage my own language? Does my tone, does my body language manifest my own biases? How can I manage this to become more accepting and more inclusive? What kind of questions do I formulate in these conversations? Do they drive my agenda, or do I seek more about the individual? What about my own setting? So here, nagsisimula sa internal self-awareness. We begin with internal self-awareness. What is my framework? How do my set and setting influence my own biases and convictions? And how do I manage them? Next, let's look at how content creators, the media, authors, and writers, no? These are just some questions, something that we could think about. How can I expand my research further? What other resources should I look at? How can my work and my contribution support harm reduction, not just for the individual, but also for his or her community? Have I painted the individual in a big picture perspective? What are other potential solutions that I can offer? And finally, for the community. And with the community, this goes for everyone, regardless of profession. You see, drug setting is something that can go beyond the context of drugs. No, you can replace drugs with anything, with alcohol. Alcohol sets setting. Drinking, sex setting. Sex setting. Political stance or political leaning, and then setting. The DSS is something that we could flexibly use in any discourse that we have. Something that will give us a new lens on how we could view and support or probably provide and manage the individual. In this slide, we go back to the main principles of harm reduction and asking ourselves, are my solutions relevant, meaningful, specific? Are they evidence-based? No? How do we assess the kind of environment that we have now, and how can I provide appropriate services for the individual and his or her community? In the last quarter of an hour, we talked about Patron Saints of Nothing. We had a quick look at its story, the background of the book, and an experience and reception in the Philippines. We looked at how it reflects the realities that we have in our country. We also look at the drug setting model, and we use this as a lens on how we could analyze the elements and the devices that Randy Ribay used or are presented in the Patron Saints of Nothing. And towards the end, we came up with questions on how we could further expand our awareness, how we could integrate this in the work that we do and with the kind of interactions that we have. If you want to have a copy of our paper, we prepared an abstract for this presentation. We'd be happy to share that with you. Please visit the Safe Open Space booth here in Airmeet, and we'll be very happy to share with you a copy of Examining the Drug Setting Framework in Randy Ribay's Patron Saints of Nothing. And we encourage you to share this, not just with your colleagues, but with your communities, with the hope and intention of promoting harm reduction and seeing the individual from a big picture perspective. So like Reguero, we create our own biases, and at some point limited our understanding of people whose lives involve drugs. But through dissecting the elements and embracing the realities of others like June, we can find ways on how we could rethink, on how we could reframe our minds, our perspectives, and start embracing these ranges of realities. We could start providing appropriate and relevant services, manifest active kindness through pragmatic compassion, ultimately promoting well-being and upholding human rights. As what author Randy Ribay says through Mia in Patron Saints of Nothing, all we need to do is stop. We need to stop and don't make it about us. Let's ask questions, know more about the individual, and let the individual talk and share where they're all coming from. And then let's listen. It's not going to be a walk in the park. Oh no, there will definitely be obstacles, miscommunications, biases from others and from others, ourselves and from others. But if we'll only keep our focus on our intention to help others in our communities, if only we'll continue seeing the humanities and the stories that people like June and Jay have behind every headline that we see and every narrative that we read, we'll soon realize that we are winning in our own little way. Once again, my name is Orly Agawin. I'm from Space Open Space, and I appreciate you for joining our talk today. Keep safe, keep sane but never silent. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Orly, for that amazing, amazing talk. Everybody has been raving on the chats, been joining you throughout the session, and we love how you broke down all of the different elements of the drug set setting framework and how it related to Randy Ribay's Patron Saints of Nothing. To borrow some of your words, we saw the importance of seeing the dynamism of one individual, appreciating the ranges of realities of the different characters, dissecting the elements and embracing those realities with a more empathetic approach. So, thank you again for that wonderful talk.